Okay, medium-bodied, soft. I was suggesting nut-like characteristic to it. Very coffee aroma. I think it's kind of the whole thing. This is a very subtle coffee. Yeah, I vote nut-like. Is there in our coffee aroma thing? Is there a nut-like? Yeah, nutty, nut-like. Yeah. Almond. Yeah, much more. Well, not even almond. Almond's too big of a nut, I think, when I think almond.
In between those two.
Yeah, so definitely not peanutty. Peanutty is an undesirable characteristic in coffee. You get a peanutty coffee, you're like, what is going on with this? Right? So just because a coffee has a flavor profile doesn't mean it's good. Right? I remember years ago we were cupping this coffee from Timor, and it had the weirdest taste to it. I mean, it was distinctively the weirdest taste ever. And we're cupping it, and finally my wife comes around and she goes, well, that's cooked beef. I'm like, that's it. Ugh! You know, it's like, it was gross, you know. So didn't buy that coffee. All right. Next up, Sumatra. The Sumatra, this is from the Gayo Mountain. This is a very unusual coffee out of Sumatra. The Gayo Mountain mill is the only mill that I'm aware of that has the capability of wet processing coffee. Essentially, the Gayo Mountain mill is a replica of the wet mills in Java. In fact, this Gayo Mountain mill, the trees came over from Java. And it was almost like, can we grow Java coffee in Sumatra? Well, as it turns out, no, because coffee is a real complex relationship with its environment. So just because you got the same trees and the same conditions doesn't mean you're going to get the same coffee, right? Which also leads me into saying that just because this coffee tastes this way doesn't mean that all Sumatra coffee tastes this way. Just because Ethiopia, that Yerga Chefe tastes that way, doesn't mean that's the way Ethiopia is going to taste, right? A good example of that was the reason why we're carrying that Karnataka coffee out of India is because I used to buy that flavor profile out of a coffee out of Nicaragua. It's really cool. It was that great dry, woody wine coffee that I was looking for. Well, it turned out that we overbought the coffee, sold out early in the year, and so I had to go looking for that flavor profile. They were sold out completely. And I didn't find the coffee in Nicaragua. I found that same flavor profile in India. So, and that's the thing. I'm buying coffee based on flavor profile, not on geopolitical designations. I'm not going to go looking for Sumatra coffee. I take it back. I do go looking for Sumatra coffee because Sumatra's a big seller. But I'm not looking for, I must have a Peru. I must have an India. I'm not concerned about where it comes from necessarily as what it tastes like. Now that being said, we can get into this whole issue of the socioeconomics of coffee. Most of these coffees here, let's see, with the exception of the Kenya and the India, the rest of these coffees are fair trade organic cooperatives. And the reason I think that why we have such a predominance of these coffees, this is where the best coffees are coming from. These small cooperatives have really come to the forefront for coffee quality. They are the leaders in coffee quality now. All right, got my little aside. We were at Gayo Mountain, right? Was that the right? Okay, so it's a medium coffee, maybe leaning to the fuller side, but not quite. And this was that coffee that had that warming spices characteristic to it, if you recall. Okay, let's do the Bolivia, because as we learned from this one, I would say it's medium to full-bodied. It was, do we remember what the taste was on it? Soft. It was a very soft coffee. And in this case, taste the softness. Right there on the top of the tongue. Yeah. The outstanding characteristic of this coffee. This was that very woody coffee, but it had that liqueur-like quality to it, and I think that's what the real outstanding characteristic of this coffee is. Now, speaking of using milk, this coffee will take cream and sugar like nobody's business, right? Because it's not so strong that the coffee is going to predominate, but that, especially with that liqueur-like quality, it's going to really it'll perfectly match up with cream and sugar. Yeah. And because it's a soft coffee, you can, Caranavi was the cooperative, or is the, where the coffee came from. Caranavi is a little town in Bolivia down the road of death. Go down this world's most dangerous road. Now there's a new road on the other side of the canyon, so it's just a road of near death now. The old road of death is now for cyclists to use, and they actually have more deaths now on the thing, and there's no traffic on it. Okay, so we get all that on that one. Okay, the Dominican Republic, it's Barahona is the region that it comes out of, and this was that, I would say, much more fuller-bodied coffee. It was definitely a full-bodied coffee, and it had that very very earthy quality to it. And then finally, that Peru, God's gift to coffee. When it comes down, it used to be back in the day when coffee buyers were buying coffee, we were looking for the complete coffee, the one that had it all. That's when Jamaica Blue Mountain was king. That was one of those coffees that was considered to just be, it had everything to it. And I think that's the way I think about with this coffee from Peru. It's from the Cajamarca area, but just say Andes Gold. That's all that really matters. Andes Gold is the coffee. It's one of these, it's full-bodied, it's sweet, it's got that chocolate-like characteristic to it. And it's just we'll talk about balance oftentimes in coffee, and what they're talking about is the balance of all those flavors that are working in concert. And I think that's really what this coffee is offering. It's just putting everything forward in a nice, great, balanced way. Whereas like at Ethiopia, Yirgacheffe, it's a great coffee, but it's light on body. It's like it's missing body, right? If it only had a little more body, it'd be perfect, right? It's a complete balanced coffee is one of those coffees where you just feel like you don't have to add anything to it to make it perfect. And I think that really is what this Peru is, and why it's our #1 selling coffee. It's just a classic everything coffee. It's ideal. Okay, so it was full-bodied, it was sweet, and it had that baker's chocolate-like characteristic to it. Okay, now that you've written all that stuff down, if you go to the brochure, it says coffee descriptions. Let's see how well we did. If you'll notice on our coffee descriptions, we have the name of the coffee. Oh, you did it right there. And then it'll say, we describe the flavor of that coffee. And it's, I said light to medium body. I was being nice to it. Yeah. Oh, it's definitely sweet, delicate floral aroma. Okay, I'd buy that. We didn't do the Rwanda. There's the India. Light to medium body, dry, fragrant, woody character. Would you buy that? Yeah, there you go. The Kenya, medium body, dry, full floral aroma. Now you can see, like when I'm describing this up for the customers, I'm not going as deep into those aroma characteristics because chances are they're not going to pick up on those real subtle characteristics. Never let the cupping table fool you. The cupping table is its own little world, and it doesn't necessarily translate out. It's the ideal world, but it's not going to necessarily translate all the way out.